Thank you so much for joining us for So You Want to Be a Preservationist, part of our 2024 webinar series, Preserve the Past, Build for the Future. We're recording this session, and it will be made available later on our YouTube channel. If you would like to utilize closed captioning, please click on the caption button below at the bottom. I'm Susan Glimsher, Director of the Office of Communications, Education, and Outreach at the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation. I'm a brunette with long hair. I'm wearing a purple shirt and I have on silver dangly earrings. There is a great need to bring a new and more diverse workforce to the fields within cultural resources management. Those fields include archaeology, anthropology, museum studies, and of course, historic preservation. We hope to show students at any age the many ways they can use their degrees when entering these fields. Today, you'll hear from a panel with wide-ranging experience, and we truly hope they will inspire you on your career journeys. The ACHP is an independent federal agency that promotes the economic, educational, environmental, and cultural values of historic preservation and advises the President and Congress on national historic preservation policy. The ACHP also influences federal activities, programs, and policies that affect historic and cultural properties. The ACHP is comprised of 24 statutorily designated members, and we are the only federal agency whose sole mission is historic preservation. A large part of the ACHP's work is overseeing the Section 106 review process of the National Historic Preservation Act, which requires federal agencies and all those receiving federal funding or federal licensure to consider historic preservation when carrying out an undertaking. This webinar series fulfills several aspects of our mission: to educate the public about historic preservation, to bring young people into these fields, and to build a more inclusive preservation program. We have a great lineup this year for Preserve the Past, Build for the Future. All webinars start at 2 p.m. Eastern Time and last for 1 hour. Coming up on February 21st is Living History, the Past, Present, and Future of Historic Black Towns and Settlements. On March 26th is History in Danger, community-led responses to preserving Asian American Pacific Islander heritage sites. On April 24th, join us for Traditional Trades Careers in Historic Preservation. And our final webinar in the series will be May 21st, Disappearing Indigenous Heritage, Climate Change, and Community Displacement. You could register for all of these on our webinar page. I believe Shayla is putting that link in the chat. And you can also find recordings of our past year's webinars at that same link. We are excited about today's guests who will be joining me on screen now. They are Patrick Raley, who is an architectural historian for the U.S. Forest Service Eastern Region. Katie Zapel, who is a historian archives manager for Zippo, Case, and Ronson, Zippo Manufacturing Company. And Hunter Miles Davis, an interpretive ranger and operational leadership facilitator at the New Orleans Jazz National Historical Park. Welcome to all of you. Before we begin, so happy to have you all here. Before we begin, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to put them in the chat box. Once the speakers have finished their presentations, my colleague Lynn Richmond will pose your questions to the speakers. And we want to hear from everyone, so please don't hesitate. Now let's begin with Pat. Welcome.
Hi, thanks, Susan, and thanks to Lynn for inviting me. I've been looking forward to this. I think I'd like to just start off by explaining a little bit about my job. And then if I have any time left, I'll discuss a little bit about how I got to this point. So my job is as an architectural historian for the United States Forest Service in Region 9, which is a large region in the northeast of the country, from Minnesota down to Missouri, all the way over to West Virginia, and then up to New England. Now, luckily, I have a great team that I work with, 4 other people, so we kind of split up the territory and have our zones and work out of those. I'm generally in the southern zone, which is Missouri over to Ohio, and I also head up to Michigan every once in a while. So the main point of my career here is trying to figure out what to do with historic properties that the United States Forest Service owns. Now you might ask yourself, what could the Forest Service possibly own that's a historic building? Well, there's quite a lot, and it ranges from anything from recreation sites built by the CCC, the Civilian Conservation Corps, in the 1930s, to historic properties that we took over from land transfers. So those could be homes, administrative buildings, and a lot of other historic infrastructure such as bridges or dams. So what are we supposed to do with these? Our initial direction comes from project proposals. So we'll get a proposal from one of the units, which there's 14 national forests and 1 tallgrass prairie in this region. So it's quite a few. And they'll say, well, there's something that we want to do here, but we don't know what to do with the historic properties on here, with the historic built environment. So I say, okay, let's go take a look at what you got, and we'll go and see, if there's anything there. So generally, if it's 50 years or older, we'll take a pretty in-depth look at it to see if it meets any of the criteria for that property to be significant. If it is, then we have certain obligations under the law to do our best to preserve that property. A lot of the preservation isn't just preservation to turn it into a interpretive site, although those are some of my favorite. A lot of the work we try to do is in adaptive reuse, or to find another new use for an older property so that we don't have to get rid of it. And sometimes that takes a little bit of work because there's a lot of consulting parties that you need to talk to. Specifically, each state has their own state historic preservation officer who we consult with frequently. So that is the main amount of work that we do for the Forest Service in this region in my job. Now, how did I get to this point? Well, it wasn't exactly what I would call a straight line. Initially, when I got out of high school 1,000 years ago, I didn't know what to do, so I joined the Army. That is a great place to go if you don't know what you're going to do, because they're going to tell you what to do. So after about 10 years of that, I had enough, and they said, okay, we'll pay you to go to school. So I said, all right, let me try that. So I have no idea what to do. So if you don't know what to do, the best thing to do is, if it's not somebody in the Army telling you, you should call your mom. So that's exactly what I did. I called my mom. I said, what am I supposed to do here? They're going to pay me to go to school. So she says, oh, you should study archaeology, which I didn't even know you could do that. So I went and found out what it was all about. I signed up for as many anthropology courses as I could, and I fell in love with it. It was amazing. I saw the world in a different way, and I saw that there were a lot of opportunities to use that education for a career. I think a lot of us anthropology students, at least in my experience, started off in the field of archaeology, which is exactly what I did. And I started with the Forest Service in eastern Idaho, which was a beautiful place and a great place for archaeology. I got introduced there to historic buildings, which I knew a little bit about from school, but not a ton. But luckily there were a lot of opportunities, especially the Passport in Time program that the Forest Service has, where they help to restore historic buildings. Well, I loved that part. It was a great complement to walking around the high desert looking for archaeological sites. So it was a nice balance, and it gives you a little bit more to do in the winter time because there's plenty of background research that goes into that. So I did that for about 5 years, and I got another job opportunity as an archaeologist at the United States Military Academy at West Point, New York. So I showed up there and I said, "Oh, I'm the new archaeologist." And they said, "Okay, here's your workload." Well, it was 90% historic buildings. So I was like, "Oh boy, I need to get spiffed up on this or I'm going to have a hell of a time." So I spent 10 years working there, and most of that work was in historic buildings, which I really loved. It's such a fun job. It's intricate and it has a huge benefit. So after I left there, I only left there about 2 years ago. I applied for this architectural historian job back with the Forest Service, my old family, and got to work in a large area in Region 9, and that's where I'm at today. So after 23 years of government service, I'm still enjoying my time. I think the education that I got was very beneficial, but also so much of what I learned during all this time was on the job. So it was very important and critical for me to learn as much as I could, no matter what agency I was working for. The field of historic preservation offered a lot of great opportunity, and I took advantage of it. So if there's any questions after, I'm more than happy to answer any of them. But I think my time is up, so I will pass it.
Pat, before you get off the screen, do you want to just spend a couple of minutes talking a little bit about what you do day to day in terms of what archaeology is? Because there may be people online who don't even know what archaeology is.
Oh, well, yeah, I haven't done archaeology in a couple of years. So it's architecture. Okay. Yeah, the architectural history here is in planning future use for historic buildings. Now, I'll be happy to talk about archaeology if anybody wants to.
Okay, well, we can hold on that until the end of the session. So okay. Thank you so much. And yeah, now I'd like to welcome Katie.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Susan, and thanks to Lane and Jayla for inviting me to be part of this webinar series. I have a little presentation. Hopefully that's all right. You'll see why here in a minute. I'm former educator. I just can't quite help myself. So like I said, you all know why you're here. You know what the webinar is about. But when I was thinking about historic preservation and different career paths and excited to hear from the other panelists, all I could think was that my path wasn't really a straightforward one. And again, given that I used to be a professor, I like to start right up front with what I want to accomplish with my talk. So thinking about my path and how it wasn't straight, but how grateful I am for where it led me to today, I would encourage everyone who has joined, who's trying to figure out how they can leverage their interest in history and historic preservation into a career, to be open to unexpected opportunities and experiences along the way. So how it started. I am from Bradford, Pennsylvania. It's that blue star, northwestern Pennsylvania, right on the Pennsylvania-New York state border. It's a really small town. I live in a very rural area. And we actually have a historic downtown, beautiful old buildings. We were an oil and gas boom town. And I always was in love with my hometown and how amazing the community and the people are, but didn't necessarily pay as close attention to the really pretty buildings downtown, although that is, I think, maybe one of the most visible parts about historic preservation, kind of part of Pat's journey as well. And I always had a childhood love of history. My grandpa was a history social studies teacher, and I loved learning about history from him and just in general from reading. So when it came time to go to undergrad, I picked the University of Pittsburgh at Bradford. So I selected a regional campus in my hometown, and I studied human relations, which was a combination of anthropology, psychology, and sociology. Ultimately, I really loved anthropology. That's what I wanted to go into the most. And so I had this opportunity to complete an internship at the Seneca Iroquois National Museum in Salamanca, New York. It's about 30 minutes away. We're really fortunate to be this close to the Seneca territory and to have them welcome us and teach us. So you may or may not be familiar with the term material culture, but it's an important one for me and for anthropologists. So it refers to the things that humans create and use. So our tools, our clothes, our houses, furniture, all the stuff that we make and use. And the reason why it's so significant is that it's imbued with meaning, right? We make it have meaning. Sometimes as a status symbol, think about maybe the brands you choose to wear or not wear, in terms of its expense, just how we interact with the built environment around us. So that's going to kind of be a through line with something that I've always been interested in. During my internship, I studied Indigenous Seneca beadwork. I actually was fortunate enough to create a museum exhibit on historic beadwork from the early 1800s. And then I later completed my senior capstone project on contemporary beadwork, really interested in how the present is shaped and influenced by the past. And while I really loved museum work and being in the archives, I decided to continue my studies in cultural anthropology. So I went to the University of Kentucky for my master's and Ph.D. To study cultural anthropology, and particularly focusing on economic anthropology. Again, you may or may not be familiar with some of the training that we receive as an anthropologist. One of the things that we learn is that there's lots of interconnections and commonalities among humans. And some of the ways that I was trained in documenting, gathering this information are things like oral histories, family histories, interviews, and taking all of those as valid sources of knowledge and data. I also really learned the importance of good research, data collection, and data analysis, and how those all go hand in hand. So I completed my doctoral research in Otavalo, Ecuador. It's where that blue star is, in the Andes Mountains. And I studied crafts and textiles produced and sold by indigenous Otavaleños. So I was looking at the artisans and the crafts that they made, in particular production and distribution. Again, looking at material culture, this time crafts, textiles, and the meaning behind those objects for different actors, producers, vendors, consumers. But I mentioned all those interconnections in anthropology. I also was studying gender, economics, identity, belonging, indigeneity. There's kind of a lot there. And during my graduate studies, I needed a flexible job. I was fortunate to be able to come home to my hometown and get a job working in the Zippo archives. I was doing research. I was working with material culture, this time lighters. I was lucky. But all of this was building up to my actual plan, my actual goal was to be a professor. This is why I set out to get my PhD in the first place. So I found myself back at the University of Pittsburgh at Bradford, this time adjuncting as a professor. And I love the work, but you may or may not know that adjuncts typically have a lot of job instability, the semester by semester contract. And although I loved it, it was important to me to be able to stay in my hometown, give back to my community, but trying to figure out how I could do that. So the twist, all right? We started the beginning of my talk with a lesson. For me, that unexpected curve was an unexpected opportunity, the job opening for a joint position, Zippo archivist, case historian, Zippo case museum curator. I applied and really highlighted some of those things that I've been talking about today in terms of research, oral histories, material culture, and how those things can come together. So I sort of see my job as private sector meets maybe more well-known historic preservation. The company is obviously seeking to preserve company history in the archives and then share that through our museum. But because they are companies that are so intertwined with our community's history, and also we also preserve and then share community history. So I continue to learn more about historic preservation and how to incorporate it into my work to benefit the community, the company, me, and my work. And one of the things that I try to do is leverage my anthropological training. So one of the things that really resonates with me in historic preservation is oral histories and the significance of local knowledge, how important that is to a community. Thinking about the heritage of a group of people or a particular community, I think it's important that we invite them into our spaces, listen to what they have to say, listen to what's important to them. This is something that was important in all of my training, all of the jobs I've had before this, so I bring it with me now. So day to day, most of the time I am here in the archives, and if you can still see me, you'll see lots of shelves and boxes behind me, and if not, you'll see it at the end. And I actually typically work alone in this building with all the cool old stuff. But the public-facing part of my job, one of the most visible things is the Zippo Case Museum. So pictured bottom left there. I give the tours at the museum, and while I'm there, I try to listen to everybody's stories. Again, what brings them in, what resonates with them, what's important to them. Part of my job is to also design and maintain the exhibits that are in the museum. So that center photo is the newest exhibit that we installed in March of last year, 2023, titled Masters of Metalworking, highlighting design techniques and the technology that is used to make those. So kind of neat to me how those go hand in hand. But I also really strive to make history accessible and enjoyable as possible, even beyond the walls of the museum. So the bottom right photo is a traveling case mini museum and activation. So those boards are actually essentially a mini timeline that I got to help develop, and this travels all around to different events, especially in the South, telling the story of W.R. Case & Sons Cutlery Company. It's also owned by Zippo Manufacturing Company. So yes, indeed, Zippo lighters and case knives. One of the other things I try to focus on in my job is community outreach and engagement. So last summer, I planned, chaired, and executed an event that I was super proud of. The theme was Made in Bradford, and the goal was to celebrate all that is made in Bradford. So obviously Zippo lighters and case knives, but we also invited local makers, as we called them, artisans, crafters, you name it, to sell their goods, to demonstrate what makes our community so rich and so special. And you can see those in the center photo. And then I also really had this vision to bring history to life, literally. So to celebrate our Zippo's first national advertising campaign, the anniversary of it, we had an event for the community to engage with this history, and I dressed up as this fictional character and brought her to life. So hopefully you kind of got the sense that my pathway here wasn't necessarily straight. Lots of things happened along the way, lots more detail I could go into, but not quite in 10 minutes. But because I was able to stay open to those opportunities, things that were unexpected allowed me to find a career that I hadn't expected, but that is super rewarding and still lets me, engage with people, hear their stories, study material culture, complete my research. In other words, leverage my background in a different way. So just like Pat, I'm happy to take questions at the end, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Katie. That was great. So now I'd like to welcome Hunter to the conversation, and please do keep the questions coming in the chat and the Q&A. We will get to all of them. Hunter.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you to Lynn and Susan, and also to the other panelists for having me today. I am Hunter Miles Davis. I am currently a ranger here in New Orleans, at New Orleans Jazz National Historical Park, and it is a pleasure to be here with you all today. My story is a little bit different. I've been a part of the Park Service for about 2.5 years now, straight out of school. And my pathway to the Park Service was a little bit direct, straight out of school. So I was a sophomore at Hampton University, where I received my Bachelor of Arts in Audio Production, Music, and I also had a study in leaderships minor. But while I was in school, I had a couple of great people who influenced the path that I ended up on today. One person being one of my best friends, Isis Plaza, who was also a park service employee on the HR side of things. And we kind of bounced ideas off of each other while we were in school. And it was the summer of it was leading up to the summer after my sophomore year. Um, After having that first summer home and kind of going back home and experiencing, um, my hometown, I wanted to do something different. And I've always been able to complete all my academics very well, straight A student, things like that. So I knew there would never be a problem with getting an internship, but I had certain guidelines and bases that I wanted to cover before I accepted an internship. And so what I really wanted to look for was an internship that was not in my hometown, one that paid, and then one that also took care of housing. And so I was prepared to do any and everything, whether it was in science, whether it was in finance, anything of that sort. I was just ready to leave my hometown, which is Charlotte, North Carolina. And so I ended up talking to my friend Isis, and we discovered that there was a program online called the Green Youth Foundation. And through the Green Youth Foundation, they had a program known as the Historically Black Colleges and Universities internships, which are internships tailored for those who attend those universities. And so upon looking on that site, I was pretty late to the program. There was one more position that was left there. And when she first mentioned it to me, again, like I said, I was prepared to do pretty much any and everything just to be away from home. But once I went to the website, I saw that the last position that was open was here in New Orleans. It was a internship for a park ranger position that featured music. And I've been playing music my whole entire life. And I was like, this seems perfect for me. Growing up listening to jazz, of course, being a fan of the great Miles Davis, and just being a person that has been heavily influenced by music my entire life, I just knew that this was going to be a fun experience for me. And so after that summer, I was able to intern here. And on a day-to-day task, I would play music and again have a different kind of historic preservation approach. um, Now, as time progressed, I completed another internship the year after at a park down the street from New Orleans Jazz National Historical Park, which was John Lafitte National Park and Preserve. And once I completed those two internships, I knew that New Orleans was a place that was definitely going to uh, be on my places to live. And not only to live, but to work and to basically work in my passion. And so as time progressed, COVID hit and everything was kind of shaky, and I didn't really know what my next move was going to be. But through the internship I had, there was a DHA, or a direct hire authority, which allowed me to get directly hired into the Park Service and not necessarily go through the traditional avenues that it would take to become a park ranger. And so as I was able to capitalize on that opportunity because of my internship and experiences that I've had in the past, in 2021, I was able to finally move to New Orleans and become a park ranger here at New Orleans Jazz National Historical Park. And so my day-to-day duties, I'm a musician. Again, I get to work in my true passion of sharing my gifts and talents as a musician. And then I'm able to give that historical preservation from a cultural aspect. A lot of times you think of history preservation, you may just think of the land structures and nature preservation, but with jazz being one of America's first and really true birth cultural forms here in New Orleans Jazz, we hone into that, and we like to focus on emphasizing that to the community and to the public. And so every day I get to play in concerts, I get to play with local artists, I get to play with those that come out of town, those who make up this genre. So I've been able to play with some West Africans, some French, and just overall see the entire cultural infusion of not just music, but the totality of just New Orleans in general. And so through my day-to-day duties, I also get to work in my other passion, which is film and production, in which I am the head social media person, as well as production. I do most of the production here at New Orleans Jazz National Historical Park. And so the other role that I do sit in is operational leadership facilitator, which is a little bit different from my traditional duties. I've always been a person to kind of say yes to any and everything, which was how I ended up in this position to begin with, and just keeping an open mind. And so I was able to really look into some of the different programs and avenues that my job offered. One of those being operational leadership facilitator, which focuses on the safety regulations of the National Park Service. And I get to go and travel around to all different parks in the Southeast region, including the Virgin Islands, which was pretty cool. I mean, a paid trip to the Virgin Islands to teach about safety. I mean, you can't really beat it. But through those avenues, I'm able to really work and cultivate myself in the way that I would like to, and really learn. I've never been shy from learning, and that would be one thing that I would advise. Just keep an open mind in any and everything that you do, no matter what, because you just never know where it may take you. And so with this operational leadership title and responsibility, I've been able to, like I said, go and travel in the Southeast region to all the national parks here, but I've also been able to host some facilitation sessions in other national parks. So it's 428 parks now, and I've been able to go to many different regions out in California, Montana, and I actually completed a detail in Utah out in the Arches National Historical Park, or Arches park out there, and the whole entire Bryce Canyon area. So I've done some pretty cool things within my 2.5 years of working for the Park Service. And I'm just excited for all the things that I have to come up. One thing, again, that I would also like to emphasize is just being true to yourself and remaining humble through anything that you do. That has been the most rewarding thing for me through my process. Because again, I'm fairly new to this career, and to a career in general. I came straight out of school right after my degree. So I have a lot to learn, and I've never really been in this setting before, but I've been able to sit back and learn from a lot of different people, and my work has been shown and showcased through many different avenues. So again, thank you guys for having me. I'm honored and humbled to be on such a panel with such great people, and I'm glad to be a part. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you so much. And also such great advice, Hunter. Thank you. So we have some time for questions and answers now. And I'm going to ask if all the speakers would come up, I'm going to ask all of the speakers to be on the video, and my colleague Lynn will go through the questions.
First of
I
all,
have a
thanks so much
question.
oh, yes, Pat, go ahead.
Yeah. Can I switch jobs with Hunter for a few months?
I know,
just to see what
really.
it's like. All right. Sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, no. We're all kind of envious of Hunter's great career. It sounds like you not only have fun, but are helping people know more about national parks and historic preservation. So, Pat, there was a question in the chat. What was the name again of the program that got you interested in the buildings of the Forest Service?
Passport in Time program. So that's a Forest Service program, deals specifically in historic preservation. They take volunteers and they do all manner of historic preservation, from archaeology to architectural history, even archives curation. There's a lot of opportunity there. There is a national website, the Passport in Time Clearinghouse. So you can look that up and see what opportunities they have, and it's a blast. It's great. They're all over the country, lots of different types of jobs, and the people want to be there. So it's a great experience.
Definitely. We'll get the link into the chat for everybody.
Lynn, may I just interject something? I'm sorry, before you go on to the next one. So speakers, if you don't mind, would you put your emails into the chat, because people are asking for them? If there's a privacy issue, we can just have people get in touch with you a different way. Thanks.
Yeah,
Sorry,
mine's in
Lynn.
there.
Well, it looks like there's just one quick follow-up question, and then we'll get to Hennessy's question. Pat, do they include historic preservation law? Question from Casey.
Oh, in the Passport in Time program? That depends on who the leader of that is. Like I would, before the work actually began, give a basic overview of what the laws are and why we're doing it, so that they have a better grasp of, that we're not just out there bending nails for fun, that it's actually, in a lot of cases, a legal requirement. And I hate to say that we do stuff because it's a legal requirement. The real reason we're doing it is because the people in that community want to see that thing preserved. It's not, the Forest Service isn't like, the ranger there doesn't say, I want this house. It's the people in that area that said, we don't want you tearing this down or altering it. It means something to us. So the philosophy behind it is generally covered, and then the legal mandates that we exist under are generally covered. But I wouldn't say that it's a full class on Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act. That's something that the ACHP is known for. So I would get a hold of them if you wanted any courses in that.
Yeah, we actually have some free webinars on demand. Unfortunately, our website right now, we're migrating those trainings to another platform. So check back and look for our training courses on Section 106 in the next couple of weeks. All right, so Katie, this question's for you from Hennessy. I had no idea some companies have historic preservationists working within to maintain company history. Is that a very common occurrence? And do you have an example of other companies that do this for potential job opportunities? Yeah, I mean, this is something that we didn't know even existed. So let's hear more about it.
It's a little more common than you would think. And you might have noticed that when I just kind of name dropped like the multiple listings for my job. So it kind of depends on who you ask what my job title is, just with the terminology that they're familiar with, whether it's archivist or historian or archives manager. So if it's something you're interested in pursuing, I would look into some of those various keywords. They might call it something different depending on where you're looking. But a lot of places that are interested in preserving their culture or their company culture or their company history will also then showcase it either through an exhibition or a museum, or maybe they'll call it like a cultural center. And again, those are keywords that you can look for. But places like Louisville Slugger, Jim Beam, they have staff on site whose job is to document company history and then be able to share that with the public so that they have those opportunities and experiences to learn more about the history. I would say often it's like something that's considered a legacy brand, or a company that knows that their history is part of what makes them important and sets them aside. So I was trying to be quick and not get through everything, but Zippo was founded in 1932 and Case dates back to 1889. So both companies have very rich history and know that that's part of what sets them aside from other lighter or knife companies. So yeah, those would be a good place to start.
I wanted to jump to this question because I think everybody would be interested in the answer to this. I'm interested in advice suggestions for non-traditional students looking to enter the field, as well as people with physical disabilities and mobility concerns. Do you have any advice, panelists?
Yeah, that's a good question, because at least with the federal government, they have certain requirements for applications, for not all of them for education, but there's generally some requirement there. But as far as disabilities are concerned, there's another form that you submit with your application that gives you a preference. So that shouldn't be a hurdle. Yeah, especially in a lot of preservation jobs, there's plenty of opportunity. The education, though, I'd look into and see.
I will say that a lot of universities have come a long way in terms of what they offer and provide. Most universities tend to have like a department, how big or small, it kind of depends on the size of the university, that is there to help provide more access and more accessibility, maybe in terms of things with closed captioning or whatever you might need access to. But also online resources are really, really great. It depends on if you need the formal education, the degree, or if you can take advantage of things like webinars and YouTube. There's a lot of really great resources online.
And I would say, since I kind of have a non-traditional historic background, I don't, let me just preface this by saying I was never a just super fan of history. I never thought I'd be working in history or presenting in any way, shape, or form or fashion. So having a music degree, or really a production degree, that's what I have my degree in. I never thought I would be anywhere near the National Park Service. So I would always say on the site USA Jobs, where they have those positions, and that's not the only site to look for these different positions, but even through that platform, you can see through the qualifications, the different things and requirements that they have for these positions. I mean, I think you would be pleasantly surprised on how many variations of backgrounds you can really have when it comes to getting into these different fields. And that's the beautiful thing about it, because like I said, I never thought I would be working for the National Park Service, even though I am at the perfect national park for me. It's all a part of finding, your specific tailored position. So I will keep that in mind as well.
Hunter, we have a question for you. I'm excited to be part of this webinar and explore the richness of shared past and jazz heritage. If you feel comfortable, please share your insights and how you manage the info collectively based in the diverse stories that make the community so unique. Also, how did you manage jazz as national historic heritage? From George.
Right. That's a great question. So starting off, we talk about the history in general of the history of New Orleans and how New Orleans is just a special place because of the Mississippi River and the transportation of slaves to this region, and how that really plays a role into creating not only the music scene here, but the culture and diversity that you see in New Orleans overall. And so that is the main focus, not to forget any storylines or any part of the history, just by focusing on the music. And that has been my number one task as being a jazz ranger, if you will. And the first part of the question, focusing on with this being a part of just historic preservation in general, we are basically taking, we play traditional New Orleans jazz, and then we show the progression of jazz. So from hitting New Orleans to going to Chicago's and other cities like New York and things like that, we show those different translations between the kind of subgenres of jazz, and then we all bring it in together at the end for one specific presentation of New Orleans or traditional jazz music. And so being in this element and kind of in this area to where not only people come here for the sound of traditional New Orleans jazz, but people come here for the culture, for the fun, the food, the festive things that take place in New Orleans. It's just fun to be a part of that trip and that advice for people to come and really enjoy and experience the true sound of jazz and where it really has progressed to over the years.
Are there opportunities for current students to work with the Forest Service to learn about historic preservation? Do I have suggestions? There are opportunities. For me, the opportunity that I took while I was a student was to work as a seasonal employee. So when I was out of school, I'd load the truck up and go to work. And that was the best way for me to get experience in that job. If you don't have that much time or you got something else to do, you need a shorter time frame, there are internship programs, and there's also places like HistoriCorps that do historic preservation for federal agencies where you can go and learn about historic preservation projects that are like 2 or 3 weeks long. So there are opportunities out there to gain that experience.
So if I could just add something here, almost all federal agencies, this is kind of a general answer because we're getting this question from a number of people. For most federal agencies, there are lots of ways to get involved and learn about what the agency does. And I'm sure this is true for many organizations too. As Katie will tell you, there are, for example, research assistants. Lynn, what are the names of the two things we offer with the Forest Service that the Forest Service offers in order to move into that bureau? Do you remember? There's an RA and something else. I want to say it's a research assistant and another one. There are also so many scholarships, so many internships available everywhere you look. So my advice is just to, well, first of all, my email's in the chat. So please, anyone take that and email me, and I'll be more than happy to respond to you with any questions about getting into any of these fields. We work very closely with the Forest Service. But I would just advise everyone to find where you want to go, whether you're interested in doing archive work and you want to look at the National Archives, Google internships, National Archives. Do that with any federal agency or any organization you're interested in, because there are always opportunities.
What is the biggest challenge you faced on your career pathway as a young professional, and how have you addressed your challenges?
Oh, that's a good question. So I believe the biggest challenge for me was not me specifically transitioning from intern to ranger, but for other people to recognize that I was transitioning from intern to ranger. I believe that, you know, sometimes they might have gotten used to me or seeing me in an aspect to where I was an intern, so I had different roles and responsibilities. But once I, you know, was able to earn that title of being a ranger, then our level became pretty equal. And so when that pretty much shifted, um, some people had a little bit of time that they needed to adjust for that. But one thing I would say how I addressed it was, again, being humble, being willing to listen to all perspectives, and also not being afraid of being who I am as a person, and not allowing people to um, be used to things that as they were, and again, establishing those boundaries as a young professional. Um, One thing that I made very clear was, you know, I earned this position. I have the qualifications and the necessary tools to be equipped for this position, and I would like to be treated as such. And not really would like to be, I will be, you know. And so just being and standing your ground, and allowing yourself to speak your piece without, you know, again, causing conflict or anything like that. That was my biggest challenge when it came to transitioning to just being uh, a young professional. And again, some people may think time and things like that uh, plays a role into what they can and cannot do. But overall, like I said, once you get that position and that title, you have earned that, and you don't have to prove anything to anybody. You know, you are walking your own path. And again, like I said before, walk it humbly, be willing to listen and learn from others, but also know who you are in your professional aspect.
Emily Pope put a question in here. Does anybody know the answer to this? I've been applying around within the AmeriCorps Parks Cultural Resource Crew and Historic Preservation. Is that a good way to get into the career?
That sort of depends on what career, but there's so many places to look things, job opportunities up. Does anyone want to speak to?
Yeah, sure. I would say that that's not a bad way to gain experience. It just, like you're saying, it kind of depends on what direction you want to go. So if you're looking to get a job in a specific field, it very well may have an education requirement, like I was saying before. Now, some of them may not, but you're going to have to start kind of at a basic position at the bottom of the ladder and move your way up, which I did. And it was lucky that I did that because I gained a lot of experience. But if you have some idea about which direction you want to go, because there's quite a lot, there's anywhere from archaeology to curation to archives and historic buildings and what Hunter's doing in interpretation. There's so many different fields. I would research one of those and maybe look up some of the job announcements and see what they ask for.
I also just put a link in the chat, everyone. We have a page on our website, the ACHP website, and this is certainly not a complete list, but a bunch of places where you can go to look for jobs, everything from the National Park Service to the National Organization of Minority Architects to really any opportunity you could have, archaeology, how to get into the federal government, USA Job, preservation directories, the National Trust for Historic Preservation. There's a million places you can look for jobs in all of these fields, not a million, but a considerable amount in this link. You can take a look.
And definitely check out the ACHP LinkedIn page. We post jobs and opportunities from the ACHP in there. And when we get them from other organizations like the National Park Service, the Forest Service, we try to share jobs of interest to those who are looking to get into cultural resources management and also to expand their careers. So give us a follow. And Susan, I think we're just about out of time, but Vanessa's question, where is that? Was quite interesting, and maybe we could just touch on that. Vanessa, do you want to come on? Let me give you let me allow you to speak and just ask that question really quickly.
And
Okay,
if anybody would like to stay on for 3 minutes afterwards, please put the question that we didn't get to answer in the chat at the bottom so we can quickly find it. We can do that.
Thank you for taking my question. I'm just curious, what skill or skills have benefited you all the most as someone who now works in historic preservation? Thank you.
thank you.
Interpersonal relationships.
That covers everything, right?
That is number one, is your communication.
That's a really great question. I would say in part research skills, but that includes recognizing what some sources that may not be traditionally recognized as valuable sources of information, like oral history, talking with people. What do they tell you is important? I think that's a really big one, being able to listen to what people have to say and recognizing that that's a valuable form of information, and then being able to negotiate different actors and the way that they relate to history, because some people are going to be really proud of certain things, other people might find it off-putting or want to talk about something else, and being able to negotiate that in a way that maybe isn't always comfortable, but try to find the route that helps shine light on the truth or what you feel really needs to have a spotlight on. I think can be really helpful to recognize those different voices and try to allow them all to have space.
Yeah, I agree with both of those. Just overall, just communication from many different aspects between just on a professional level. For me, it's been communication with translating these ideas and these historic concepts and kind of making them simpler for just your average person to understand and really grasp the concept and kind of leave your place of business with something to think about. And that has been one of the greatest things that I've learned thus far with working in interpretation and telling these different historic these stories that we have here. And like I said, overall with communication, being able to express your ideas and have other people understand them, that's a huge thing that you can definitely gain from working in this profession. It's a lot that goes into it, but it's very rewarding at the end of the day.
Well, I think I'm sorry, go ahead, Pat, finish up.
I would just add that there's a lot of resources out there, courses on conflict resolution, which are going to pay off for you if you get into this field. So if you look those up, I don't even think you have to pay to take most of them. So it's well worth your time.
So I just want to wrap up by saying thank you again to our wonderful panelists who gave us so much insight, and to all of the participants for being here today. We love that. Please join us again for the rest of our webinars in the coming months. Again, Shayla, may I ask you to put that link in the chat box to register, and we really hope to see you again. Also, please take a moment to fill out the survey that pops up on your screen when you exit. We use all of the information you give us to improve our webinar. And don't forget to follow the ACHP on social media and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.